Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of TEDIA Member Spotlight Series. So, this series is all about showcasing our members' innovations that are solving real challenges in the world of digital money, payments, and infrastructure. If you enjoy this format, please hit like, share it with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with more exclusive content. I'd like to start by thanking all our standard members for their continued support and say that during the episode, we will open the floor a few times for questions from the audience. So please feel free to drop your questions in the YouTube chat box throughout the session. Now, I'm pleased and honored to welcome today's guest, Joachim Samuelson, CEO of Crunchfish. And our session today is about trust and survivability by design. And the big question is, how do we design digital systems that remain functional and trustworthy even when the system itself is unavailable? Joachim prepared an insightful presentation on how resilience-driven design could reshape the future of payments and digital money, agent AI payments and CBDCs, and critical digital infrastructure far beyond finance. Joachim, thank you so much for being here, and I hand over to you.
Wow. I don't know how we can cover all that, Tamara, in just an hour.
It's
It
a
will be a challenge.
challenge.
It will be a challenge. Yes. No, thank you so much, Tamara. I very much enjoyed the Digital Euro conference, and it's great to see you again in this format instead. And as you said, it's going to be about survivability, not just of digital money, but we will actually go one level deeper to look at how trust itself could survive, because that is actually a prerequisite of making digital money survivable. And we'll do it from offline payments, but all the way to agentic AI payments, which is, I think, one of the top hot topics of the hour, isn't it?
For sure.
So if you, Tamara, would like to share the presentation, I think we should get right into it, really. Let's see here. I want to thank everybody for joining, and we will, as this is our focus in Crunchfish, we will start with offline payments, but we will end at a completely different place, agentic AI payments. And at first glance, it may seem that this is extremely different topics, but what's interesting is that ultimately they raise sort of the same architectural question. It's all about how can we get user authority, remain trustworthy when we separate authorization from the actual execution. That is very much what happens in offline payments, and is actually what happens in agentic AI payments as well. And we'll come back to that. Digital payment is becoming critical infrastructure in the world, and because of that, resilience to make it work all the time, not almost all the time, is also becoming very critical. So we will start there, but we will look at other things as well, where this commonality between offline payments and agentic AI payments actually shows itself. It's all about separating execution from authorization. And we will look at offline interoperability, we will look at programmable payments, survivable redemptions, if you have programmable money, and then agentic payments at the end, really. So the common theme will be survivability, but not just for money, how money can survive when things fail, but actually the survivability of trust itself. That is what today's presentation will be all about, really. So if you swap to the next slide, Tamara. This is something I'm old enough to remember this, that when internet came along, I was actually working at Ericsson at the time, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. The internet came along and really solved survivability for communications. Messages could continue to move around even if parts of the infrastructure failed. Communications became resilient because it no longer depended on a continuous connection that needed to be working. But payments, as the top layer of the protocol stack to the left here, never really made that transition. Most payment systems still very much depend on continuous system availability, with access to authorization, clearing, and settlement infrastructure. All have to work if payments gonna work. So it's still very much suffering from the same problems that communications had pre-internet, before internet. And this is what this presentation will be about, as I said. How can trust survive when the infrastructure that normally provides this trust is simply not available anymore? How can that work? And then we're into, if you swap to the next slide here, Tamara, we're into the first section, and it's going to be 3 sections, just a handful of slides on each section, and we will try to stop actually after each section. So you could ask questions regarding that particular sections before we move on. And the first section will be about survivable money or resilient digital money. It's going to be about offline payments. And as I said before, as payments are becoming critical infrastructure in most countries, this assumption that we are building for 24/7 availability, it's simply not a assumption that really holds water. You need then automatically to start thinking about how do you make payments work even if the system is not there. And survivability can be solved in various ways, but the real challenge is how can we maintain the governance of digital money when systems are under stress, when system is not available. Survivability is one thing, but the governance of digital money is actually what needs to be solved as well. So we swap to the first slide here then. As I said, modern payment systems are very much architecture as an always-on systems. The accounts depends on that the system can reach them. The systems depend on a lot of payment services, and the payment services depend on the infrastructure. And there is a lot of places where this can go wrong. And it's enough that something goes wrong, then this escalates and makes payments not working anymore. So the problem is not that systems fail. They do. I think that's a known fact. The problem is that payments stop when systems fail. And ultimately, because of its critical nature, the society stops because payments is like the cardiovascular system in a body. You need payments to work. And this is fundamentally an architectural problem of how payments are set up. And this can be addressed and should be addressed. So if we swap to the next slides, offline payments are often discussed as they're one thing, but in reality, they're not. There is 3 main architectures that I like to describe that can deliver survivability. There is the immediate model, which has been tested in many CBDC projects, where you're trying to make cash work digitally. In this model, you move money offline. Money is actually then held on your device. This is the immediate model. Then there is the deferred model. This is what is standard on the card rails. Paying with a credit card if the card terminal is offline is happening with the deferred model. That is essentially like signing out a personal check. You don't know if the merchant doesn't know if the customer is good for that money or not, and it's the banks that would take the risk if the customer wouldn't be. So there is a credit risk. The credit risk moves offline, not money, but the credit risk. The third model, this is the one that we are proposing, is a different model where you are going through a life cycle of that. You don't move money offline, you reserve money online into the regulated institutions. Your spending capacity, what you have to spend offline, is reserved. Then you can pay offline by authorizing your intent to pay to a payee. And that essentially is what moves offline instead. Not money, not a credit risk, but just the authorization for your user authorization of how much you want to pay offline. And this creates a much, much safer model to have it this way. And it shows, if you are looking at the institutional impact of these three models, they are really not the same. And we're going to go into that a little bit if we swap to the next slide here. Before talking about that, let's discuss in these three models, where is the money and where is the risk? Because this is where the key differences sort of show here. The immediate model moves money to the edge, and that potentially creates a systemic risk for the system, because if you crack the device that people have in their hands at home or wherever they are, then they have access to money. That's a high systemic risk for the whole system. Then you have the deferred model that moves credit risk to the edge, to the front end. And in a longer outage, then that becomes a systemic risk for the whole system, because there will be a lot of unmanaged credit that's going to be signed out. The governed model moves neither money to the edge nor credit risk. Instead, it moves the ability to sign out, do a user authorization to the edge, that later on can be independently verified anywhere in the system. Money still stays governed by regulated institutions, and that creates a much lesser risk. It's going to be a bounded risk offline, and the whole risk for the system is a governed risk for digital money. So the legacy offline models, they move the systemic risk that the online system is not working to somewhere else. The immediate moves it to the device. The deferred model moves the risk forward because there will be an uncertain settlement because the solvency is not there. But the governed approach removes the systemic risk, doesn't just move it, it removes it. If we take the next slide, please. So the real question, all these three models deliver survivability of digital money, but the real question is whether they are strengthening or weakening the governance of money. Because banks, and regulated institutions which hold money, they want it to be banking friendly. The service providers and the wallet providers, they want scalability, interoperability. They want it to be implementable. And central banks and system operators, they want governance. They have a responsibility to govern money. And they need to make sure that that works even when money is working offline. And it's significantly harder to do that in the immediate model. It's not very banking friendly. You take out money from the banks. Banks don't like that. And because you typically require hardware for these solutions, they become hard to scale and also make interoperable. The deferred model is better, I would say it works with slight disturbances, but there are credit risks. The banks would have to pay for those. It's only available on the card rail, and at longer outages. If that happens, then there are systemic risks here as well in this model. Whereas the governed approach, banking friendly, very implementable, and very governable as well. And in our opinion, you need 3 green lights in order for this solution to scale. And the governed architecture is unique because it aligns with all these institutional interests. If we take the next slides, we wrote this white paper, and I like to recommend this white paper. It's on our website under resources, the menu option resources. It tells the story basically that the challenge is not survivability. All offline models deliver survivability, but the challenge is institutional alignment. How well is the survivable offline solution aligned with the institution's requirements? That is really what's going to govern whether this is going to work at scale in the market. I'm going to stop there. And I don't know, Tamara.
I think this is, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good point to make the first stop. And I will asking for, if you are watching us and want to have some questions, so please post the question at the YouTube box. So I will collect all the questions and we can discuss here. But in the meantime, maybe perhaps we can start with because we know that many offline payment discussions focus on user experience and resilience. So why do you believe the more important question is institutional alignment?
I think we have to look at the ones that's gonna implement this solution and take responsibility for this solution will be the institutions. It's going to be the banks, the wallets, the system operators, the central banks, and unless it aligns with their requirements, it will be a solution that won't really work. So you can't just ignore institutional alignment. I think that has been in a way ignored for other properties, but I think it is a starting point that needs to be looked at. Because if it's not bankable, the banks will actually fight it. I think that is we're seeing in Europe. I've heard presentation from the banking sort of federations or banking associations that they not so happy by taking money out of the banking sector in order to hold money offline. They object to it because retail deposits is part of their lifeblood, and this is just one example. Central banks, system operators needs to do their job of governing money, and that can't just stop because it moves offline. So it's almost a hygiene factor. It needs to start there with the institutional alignment.
Good. Now I'm just return here so we can see this 3 different approaches. And you said that if the govern offline appears superior for the institutions, why do the immediate and the deferred models still dominate most current offline payment discussions? Why do you think this has happened?
I like the fact that you said discussions, because I think these are the 2 legacy models. I think central banks started with that we have cash, we issue cash, and that works offline. So why don't we make that digital? This is I've seen the discussion, as you said, on this, that this is the where a lot of central banks started to think about it. I personally don't think it's the right model, but it's an easy one to understand. Let's make a banknote digital. Let's try to replicate cash in a digital form. This is not the same as what we're saying. Let's make digital money work offline. It's another problem to solve. But also deferred, that's the one that actually is out there in the market. I think we all use it on almost a daily basis. I flew down, I'm in Madrid right now for a conference tomorrow, and I paid for some meal on the plane using using a card, basically. And that's the deferred. No one checks if I had the money. The card terminal was certainly offline, and they upload those transactions later. So that's been there for a long time. So that dominates, in my opinion, operationally out in the market is the card model. But we're coming with govern offline with a addition in a way to the card model, that we can take away that credit risk completely by allowing the user to be in control of how much spending capacity they should have offline. Sometimes you may go to a concert, you may want to have a little bit more, but you are in control. Alternatively, the alternative solution is that the system actually just decides for you whether you are allowed to pay or not. And that's set typically of how much that establishment, if it's in a hotel or if you're selling ice cream, how much risk you are allowed to take. But we believe that this govern approach is a very interesting approach, both for commercial money as well as for CBDC. But it's a new model coming in, challenging these two legacy models, immediate and deferred.
Mm-hmm. And looking for the side of the stakeholder, so which stakeholder has the most to gain from the governed offline solution? It's so central bank, commercial bank, the payment operators, the wallets, or everybody. What do you think?
I think everybody gains. Central banks, they gain that the public can have resilience, but they don't lose monetary governance. Central banks, they keep the money in on their balance sheet and even get a funding efficiency effect of it. They would like that. Any system operators, they get better deployability at scale, and wallets, system service providers and wallets, they have that capability to offer to their users without taking any additional sort of unmanaged risk, really. So I think that's the unique strength, that all of them stands to gain, which is certainly not the case for the legacy models.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so is the offline capability becoming a niche resilience feature? Or do you believe it will become a fundamental requirement for the future of the digital money?
I think we're moving to say that it becomes fundamental. As I said in the beginning, as digital payments are becoming critical infrastructure, you can't just assume anymore that continuous system availability will be there. You need to counter that. So offline capability needs to be there. It cannot be. You can't build a system only for the happy case that it will work all the time. I think this society will demand this, and I think we will see an increase that the regulators, now when they know that there is a solution that actually can deliver offline without just moving the systemic risk somewhere else, I think we will see demands that it's required in the market. So I would say it's going from, it's been a niche, but I think it's becoming more and more fundamental in payment systems.
Mm-hmm. Great. if you have any questions, please post the question at the YouTube box, and I will collect the question. I think now we can, start the second presentation.
Yes. So second act. These are some new slides that, but it's been interesting to actually put them together because Act 1, this is our backyard. We focus on resilient digital money, offline payments. But Act 2 will now focus on resilient authority. This is one level deeper. And it's absolutely necessary, this deeper question of, it's not just how money survives, it's how trust survives, because all payments is essentially about trust. You must be able to trust someone in order to receive payment from anyone. And offline payments is really a useful starting point because it forces us to separate authorization. This is where you authorize a payment to happen, from the actual execution of it to the final sort of settlement of it, where money eventually sort of gets into the hands of a merchant or another person. But when we do this separation, because that separation is not there if you look at instant payment today, it's authorization, execution, and settlement is all bundled together as one. But when we start separating, the question is, how can this user authority, you have signed out, you have authorized money to be taken from you, how can that remain trustworthy when the infrastructure, which is there to provide that trust, is not there anymore? Because now you are operating offline in another territory. How can that user trust that you give out, how can that survive and still be trustworthy when there is a separation between your authorization and the execution and settlement? And that is what this section is going to be about. So if we take the next slide here, then we talked about these survivable architectures, and they all depend on something trustworthy at the edge. You have to trust something, and the immediate model is what is trusted there is actually money. It's a form of money. You have moved money to the edge, and you trust that money. That's what you need to trust. And to know that you have enough money to make a payment is simply that you have, just like you have enough money in your wallet. This is you have enough available funds. The deferred model was trusted is that is a credit liability. It's not money, but it is an IOU that someone owes me something. You don't know whether that person is good for that or not, so it's not proven the solvency until settlement, which comes later. That's why it's called deferred. It's a deferred settlement, something that happens later on. But in the governed model, we are not moving money to the edge, or we're not trusting money. We're not trusting a credit liability at all. We are only trusting that the intent of the user is good, that that is something which we later can depend on. And managing this user intent at the edge is a lot safer than actually managing money or managing credit at the edge as an alternative. And this is what this model is about. Going into this governed approach, the governed offline life cycle, is we have talked about it, this separation of, we said that there is a reserve, pay, and settle. And the reservation step is to enable offline payment. You reserve money online. Whilst online, the capacity you can spend offline is reserved. And then you execute offline. Then up to your offline spending limit, you can sign out an intent for that money, some of that money, all of it. And then eventually it will settle when the system is available. And first it will be verified again that this is a legit transaction, and then it will move to settlement. But this is this separation I've been talking about, that authorization is separated from the execution of it and then the settlement. And this is something we have been working on for many, many years. And what is actually interesting is that we see this is starting to show up, not just for offline payments, but also for other types of payments. If you take the next slide here. So if we look at online payments for a change, now we're not in the offline payments world. There is instant payments. This is what's using a instant payment, an account-to-account payment. That's very banking friendly. It's very implementable, but there is this risk. That's why it's red on the govern. There is a systemic risk that unless everything works, you are not able to pay. That's what that red light is for. That's a systemic risk that central banks are very concerned about. And the authority in such systems are established by what's called a session. You essentially log in, and then you are communicating. You set up a trusted, almost like a trusted continuous circuit in the old internet days. That there is a session, and that trust is there as long as the session is there. When you go out of it, then the session is gone. So that is one way to have trust, through a session. A new thing which is starting to come up is programmable payments. And the programmable payments separate settlement from execution. So the settlement side, because it's programmable in the sense that it doesn't settle until all the conditions are fulfilled. So here we're seeing a very clear separation between execution and settlement. Governed is just taking this one step further, because now we have a separation also of the user authority from the execution, from the settlement. Now we've decoupled all three steps, even when we are setting up this programmable payments that we do. So we're seeing signs that authority and execution do not have to happen anymore at the same time. Authority and execution and settlement can actually start to separate, and they do separate in various ways. And we're gonna look into these three ways: trusted session, trusted assertions, and trusted intent in the next slide. So the two sort of legacy models for how trust is set up is, on the left is the trusted session. It's like a live session, and it's used for instant payment, for open banking, and it's great for any interaction that you would do. As long as this session is live, as long as it's active, you can do various things with the system. That is that model. With the trusted assertion, this is something which is being used for programmable payments or for connecting payment systems online. And this is what we see in SWIFT networks or in card networks. This is where the original user authority that has been given, that is later on remembered and assured by institution to another institution. It's not the original user authorization which is there, but one institution who can actually go in and vouch for that I have asserted that this has happened from a user, and then that assertion can move from one institution to another. That is typically what we are seeing today when we're going to connect systems together, and also now operating with programmable payments. The trusted intent that we had to invent in order to make offline payments works in a slightly different way. It works in the sense that the authority itself, the trust is bound to the object itself, that can be independently verified anywhere in the system by a payee, by the system, by any node in the system can verify this. This is the trust that governs how offline payments work. And as we will see, it will govern also how agentic AI payments will work. So I think this is the last slide of that second section. I don't know, Tamara, are we getting questions from the audience, or is it just your prepared questions that we are having?
I have some questions here.
Excellent.
Of course. But of course, just to remember, watching, please post your questions at the YouTube box so we can continue in the discussion. But yeah, you did a very interesting comparison. So you compare the govern execution to the transition from circuit switched communication to package switched communication. So is that simply an analogy, or do you believe a similar architectural switch is under the way?
I don't think it is. Well, the way I see it is that I think the trusted session will survive because it's there for a reason. It's great for when the session is live. You can just do a lot of interaction. It works. Likewise, I think trust through assertion is there as well. That works also. But there are use cases where this breaks down, where this doesn't work anymore. Offline, I think, is where this has shown itself very early, but it's starting to show up in other places as well. If you're going to connect different systems, even in an offline mode, you certainly would need, I think, this verifiable intent. We're talking about, I think, which I think will be very big, agentic AI payments, essentially allowing an agent to pay on behalf of a user. These use cases requires another trust structure, and there I think we will see it. But the shift which is happening is that we're seeing an increasing amount of sort of separation of the various steps in payments. Authorization is separated from execution, is separated from settlement, and breaking it up that way, I think it's happening, and we will go in the next section. We'll see some more signs of that, but I think it won't be as big of a change as when internet almost completely replaced continuous circuits for communication. But it will have, the new trust models will complement and allow payments to offer new use cases. That's what I think will happen.
So you believe that in the future, all these three, so the trusted sessions, the trusted assertions, and the trusted intent, will coexist in these digital systems, or perhaps converge to one exclusive approach?
No, I think they will coexist because they do solve for different situations. So I do think that there will be a coexistence of them.
You also mentioned that the trusted sessions work extremely well today. So maybe you can give more details. What problem is the trusted intent actually solving?
Well, they work great when they work, but they rely on that everything is working. So they have that. This is the systemic risk with them. If there is anything that goes wrong, then payments fail because it's dependent on that session and these executional steps which is happening there. Unless they all can happen, then you won't be able to pay. So you are then worried about, and you are introducing the trusted intent instead as a mitigation for that systemic risk that the trusted session is bound to, because when the session is gone, the payment is gone.
Yeah, so let's go to the third act then.
Let's turn to the third act then. Let's do that. Yeah. So the point here is that if this survivable user authorization is that represent a genuine architectural pattern, we should see it elsewhere, and we do. There is an increasingly, I think, a separation of authorization from execution from settlement. We see that. I don't know, Tamara, you may have seen Project Agora, the BIS project, with a lot of central banks and also leading banks are part of that. They are talking about programmable payments that needs to start happening. And as I said before, that's essentially, it's a lot about separating settlement from execution. I'll do an example here that RBI in their payment modernization are talking about electronic checks, which is, again, similar like checks works, is that you are separating settlement from executing and authorizing a check. And I think Agentic AI is interesting because there is a delegation from you as a user to an agent to actually make payment on behalf of you. And how will trust survive in that agentic AI flow? And this is where, as we will come to, it turns out to be very, very similar to how trust must survive in offline payments flow. So we'll come up to that. Yeah, I already mentioned as the next slide here about RBI announces e-checks, really. This is in their payments modernization plan for 2028. In their document for that, they're saying that this is something we like to see support for. And that means that authorization execution no longer needs to occur together. The payment will authorize something, the payer will authorize something, execution will happen later. And so, again, the important point here is that the industry is starting to separate authorization from execution. This is what we're seeing. RBI also, the next slide here, announced something which I thought was interesting as well, that they are now, this is because of fraud, they are mandating two-factor authentication for all digital payments. You know, they are huge in India for UPI payments. I think it is now 23 billion transactions every month. But now they have mandated that every single one of those needs to have two-factor authentication. RBI have not said how that's going to happen, but they have demanded it. And what I think is interesting here is that a lot of banks and payment application have then introduced, just like I have it in my home country, if I pay for an online payment, I'm getting some sort of OTP, one-time passphrase. That there is a confirmation that comes back from the system. But to build that creates friction, and you absolutely have to have connectivity, and there is some operational complexity to build that. And this is an example where I think the trusted intent could actually help, because you have something. The first factor would be that you are able to locally sign out something. That's the first factor. And then the authorization itself will carry that you want to make this payment. That's the second factor. And that is coming with the trusted intent message itself. So it becomes, in quite an elegant way, included here, without disturbing the customer. It will be completely, it will be not at all intrusive to the customer that this is just happening, and you get this required two-factor authentication. Here's another. This is also coming from India, actually, and some work we're doing there. It's looking at programmable money, and programmable money is purpose-bound money that you have decided already from the start how you could use this money. It's not money that can be used for anything. It's with a certain purpose it's been issued for, and that is relatively straightforward, I think, to issue those. But the harder thing is when they're going to be redeemed. How are you actually going to do that? And redemption, it can happen only online, but you are talking about programmable money that should be transported out and used or distributed out to people in areas where connectivity is typically quite poor. If this is social benefits, direct benefit transfers. So this is where the system typically is not really working that great. So you need to think about, it's one thing to get the social benefits out to the population, to the beneficiary, but can we also ensure that it can be redeemed in a way where without the system being available? And that is what we're calling here survivable redemption. We've been quite happy to work with a platform that is live in many countries to do those social benefit transfers, and it's going to be interesting to see that the redemption working offline as well, and not just requiring that the system is sort of there. I'm going to move to another area, which is offline interoperability. And this picture here was drawn by an Englishman that I met at a conference. When I presented a governed offline approach, he wrote an article about that this is actually how it can happen. At the top view there is that, yeah, you can initiate a payment and you can transfer a payment online to a payee, or you can do it offline. That would also sort of work. But what's interesting is that you can also do it across systems, because typically when you're going to work across systems, this is where the trust problem is becoming even harder. How can a merchant in another country trust a wallet that is coming from another country to pay there? And how can that be trusted in a situation when the trust infrastructure online it's not available? How do you make that happen? And this happens to be solving it in a very similar way as it can be solved within one system. Similar mechanism can then be solving it also across systems. the conference tomorrow, actually, here in Madrid, is gonna be talking a lot about interoperability. The focus is on online interoperability, but I'm gonna add the dimension of offline payments as well as offline interoperability. So I'll go deeper than I have the time right now to on behind this sort of slide. But let's then move to this, that the title I had in the whole presentation, Agentic AI. And here we are, there are multiple sort of players in the industry. Crunchfish, we were very early. We set up a protocol back in 2022. We call it the Trusted Application Protocol. Google set up their last year, they're calling it AP2 for Agentic Payment Protocol, and MasterCard talk about verifiable intent. But this is all about the same thing, that you need an authorized intent from the user, which can later be verified cryptographically by multiple parties. And in this case, it will be an AI agent that can be sure that the user wants to do that payments that the agent's gonna do. But most importantly, the system, before they process any payment, they must trust that the user actually wanted to do that payment. Looking at it in a very similar diagram as we had before, the user is at the bottom left corner, would have to sign out a trusted intent. This is my authority that I give to you as an agent to find goods for me and to make a payment. And that's a delegated authority that these AI agents would do. But the system will not process it unless they get that original user intent traveling all the way up to the system itself, because the AI agent will not be like a trusted institution that will just assert trust. This will be required that trust has to travel all the way from the user to the AI agent and then end to end through to the system to become a verifiable intent of the system before it can be processed. And this view is very similar to how offline payments works. If you replace the AI agent with a payee would get in a way the authority from the user that yes, you can debit me and to pay you pay offline. The merchant has the right with this trusted intent to claim money, and the system will trust that. It's quite similar to how an AI agent will be able to take money from a user and pay a merchant for goods and services. That trust has to be unbroken here, otherwise it won't work. And this is an example where the trusted session will not work because there is no, the user might have a session when they set up the rules, but then that will be, the trusted session will be gone. The trusted assertions won't work because an agent is not like an institution that has that trust. But here is where the trusted intent, this independently verifiable authority from the user could, or yeah, I would say could work here. So this is where what seems to be two very different problems here, how offline payments is solving a problem and how this future agentic AI will have to solve it. It turns out architecturally from a trust perspective, it's very much the same. So yeah, are we approaching payments internet moment? Perhaps not in the same pervasive way, but there is an evolution of trust. It used to be trusted sessions. Then you can set up trust between institutions and provide more interoperable systems. And if you also could trust the evidence that the user has authorized something, then you can create even more fancy use cases like offline payments, like agentic AI and other use cases, offline interoperability, as we talked about. And so I think we see that this is an emergence of a new trust model that hasn't been there before in the industry, and it's now coming into play. And this is actually the last slide I had. So I, again, would welcome questions from the audience or from you, Tamara, if no one else dares.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really interesting presentation. I think we do have time for one question. Yeah, so you mentioned that this I think you not mentioned, but it seems that the agentic AI, it's very different from the offline payments, but you just mentioned that it's not. It's really similar. Maybe you can comment shortly what is it's common in this architectural and why they can be connected.
Well, yeah, as I said, that both separate user authorization from the actual execution. In offline payments, the user authorizes and the payee verifies and then gives that transaction up to the system, which sort of would settle it. In a agentic AI, the same thing, the user would authorize and the agent acts later. And then even later, the system needs to settle. But the system will not settle unless they can really trust that the original user have actually authorized these payments. So you need to see that, and that trust needs to follow the whole agentic AI flow, just like it's follow the offline payment flow. You need to see that transaction. Otherwise, the system would not like to settle that payment. And that's the common architectural that's the architectural commonality between these two. It's a separation, and that the original user trust has to be there all the time. And that's perfect. It's a perfect example of where the trusted intent trust model would come into play.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, before we wrap up, yeah, please give your final thoughts, closing remarks.
No, I think it was interesting for me to prepare this, and thanks for challenging me. I know as I said, I was there and I spoke just about offline payments at the Digital Euro conference 2 months ago, but I thought it was interesting to actually try to explain it from another angle, which is an angle which I think makes a lot of it talks about the deeper trust layer, which all payments actually relies on, and the various sort of ways trust can be set up, either via session or that institutions can assert trust in between themselves, or in this new way where the trust is actually carried in the message itself. And that's a requirement for offline and surprisingly also agentic AI. So I hope I've challenged some thinking here in this presentation, and would love any feedback, any comments. And we, Tamara, correct me if I'm wrong, but this will be made available. Is that right? This recording?
Yeah, sure. This will be published. So we will become public on YouTube, so it's available for everybody to watch. We can also link the presentation at the description box. So yeah,
do that,
people
please.
can.
You have it, Tamara, as you shared it. So please link the presentation. I think that would be great as well. No, and thank you, Tamara, for we had a shy audience today. We're not asking too many questions, but I'm grateful that you stepped forward. Thank you, Tamara.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joachim. Also, thank you for the audience, to everyone watching us today. If you enjoy this episode, please like the video, share it with your network, and subscribe to our channel to support this initiative and never miss a future episode. We will see you soon at the next episode of the TEDIA Member Spotlight series. Until then, stay curious and stay connected.